The winning blueprint presents.
Draft Zone.
Welcome to the Draft Zone. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up. And what we aim to do in this segment is break down each and every single team's 2013 NFL Draft. Today we'll be talking about the Minnesota Vikings and the draft that they were able to put together. We'll break down their draft individually, each and every single pick, and not just the player itself at each and every selection, but how the pick was made, where it was made, and how these players might be able to impact the Vikings in 2013 and moving forward. So we'll give each and every single pick and score using our baseball grading scale that we always use here in the lab room and in the draft zone. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the draft wrap-up series, as we can never tell how these players are going to pan out, and each and every single team has different grades on each player in this draft, and so what might be a first-round selection for one team might be a second or a third for another. So we can't say that a team reached or not for a player, and so there will be no strikeouts here in the draft wrap-up. So what we'll do is grade out each and every single pick, get an aggregate score for the Minnesota Vikings draft as a whole, and move on from there. So I've got my draft board behind me. I've got my handy dandy pointer present. Let's get to the draft board and break down the draft for the Minnesota Vikings in 2013. I want to look at the needs first before we get into the draft itself. Vikings come into this draft desperately needing wide receiver help. They went out and got Greg Jennings in the offseason. They lose Percy Harvin. They need help at receiver. Linebacker. You lose your starting middle linebacker, Jasper Brinkley. He's gone in free agency to the Arizona Cardinals. That's an area that you need to address. You look at cornerback. You went out and drafted a guy like Josh Robinson last year out of UCF. He was solid for you. You think he's got some upside and a guy that you think can be something for you in the future, but you could use more help at the cornerback position. I think another corner or two would not hurt the Minnesota Vikings. So that's also an area of need. And defensive line. Kevin Williams getting up there in age. You could always use more pass rushing defensive ends as well. Can never have enough of those. So I think defensive line in general, defensive end, defensive tackle more specifically, is an area of need for the Minnesota Vikings. Again, Kevin Williams has been playing at a very high level for a long time, but when will that gas run out of that tank? We don't know. You always want to make sure you have someone on standby when, in fact, that does happen. So those are positions of need for the Vikings. So we go to the draft board and you look at round, pick, players, position, school. We'll break down each pick, give them a grade, average it all up at the end, and get a total aggregate score for the Minnesota Vikings. So we start in the first round, 23rd overall selection, defensive tackle out of Florida, Sharif Floyd. Wow. That is extreme value in the first round, because if everyone remembers when this whole thing first started, and heck, we were talking about Sharif Floyd up until maybe 3 or 4 days before the draft being the second overall selection to the Oakland Raiders. So we go from him being the second pick in the draft, probably not getting out of the top 15, probably not even getting out of the top 10, possibly not even getting out of the top 5, to landing at pick 23. Amazing. So if you're the Vikings sitting here at 23, there's no way Sharif Floyd is going to be here, first of all. That's your thinking. So you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do at 23? Maybe get a corner, maybe get a linebacker, maybe get a receiver, some one of those players, which one ever gives us the best amount of value at this pick, we'll go with. But to get Sharif Floyd at 23, the Vikings had to be salivating, just licking their chops at the prospects of getting their hands on a guy like Sharif Floyd at 23. I mean, that's great value. We're talking about a 6'2", defensive lineman, very athletic, still has a lot of learning to do at the defensive tackle position, but you can't deny the talent. He's very athletic, can get in the backfield, cause problems, and he's not limited to just getting after it in the run game. He's a guy that can get after the quarterback as well. And so it's rare in this league to get a defensive tackle that can do both. Get pressure on the quarterback and create havoc in the run game as well. And so I think Sharif Floyd is a 3-down defensive tackle. Your traditional 3 technique in the National Football League. He's a steal at 23, frankly. I mean, I didn't think he was the best defensive tackle in this draft. I thought that was Sheldon Richardson, but I didn't think he was that far behind. I think that, Star Latu-Lele, Sheldon Richardson, Sharif Floyd, you were getting a good defensive tackle if you got one of those 3 players. And the Vikings got one of those 3 players, and I didn't think that would be possible at 23. Yet they get one that was slated to go off the board first at the defensive tackle position. So you get a blue chipper at 23, which is rare. I mean, you're getting a player in the form of Sharif Floyd that many thought might have been the best defensive tackle in this draft. And you're getting him at 23. Amazing value at the 23rd overall selection. Defensive tackle out of Florida, Sharif Floyd. What a selection by the Vikings. I think him being there at 23 absolutely blew the Vikings' mind, because they're sitting there at 23 thinking, okay, it's either going to be linebacker, corner, or receiver for us. And Xavier Rhodes was still on the board. Cordell Patterson was still there. Manti Te'o was still going to be an option as well at that selection. So they were thinking, okay, we got the pick of the litter from the guys that we thought were going to be there. Maybe not Xavier Rhodes. They weren't sure if he would be there or not. But they knew they'd have a shot at a guy like Manti Te'o. And they didn't know if Cordell Patterson was going to be there or not, but they had backup options at the receiver position. So they felt good about their standing in the position in the draft. And so to get Sharif Floyd and have him fall to you, they had to take a step back and say, wait a minute. Forget about everything we already talked about. This guy's here. Let's take him, and we'll just move on from there. Whatever happens after that, we'll deal with it when that bridge gets here. We'll cross that bridge when it arrives. But to get Sharif Floyd at 23, wowzers. And so the Vikings absolutely hit it big here in the first round. Pick 23, defensive tackle out of Florida, Sharif Floyd, is an absolute jack. It's a home run in the first round for the Vikings. We're not done. So the Vikings in the first round at 23 with Sharif Floyd, you can put it on the board, Vikings. It's a home run. Hit it, watch it fly. It's a home run for the Vikings. So before we even wrap this thing up, let's just move on to the first round, because we got another first round pick. Then we got another first round pick. So we're in the first round still, 2 picks later. This is via the Percy Harvin trade. You get this first round selection from the Seattle Seahawks. Cornerback out of Florida State, Xavier Rhodes. Solid pick. I figured that if he got past 15, he'd be there for the Vikings if they wanted to take him at 25 or 23. Whichever pick they felt deemed necessary and felt like was the greatest value, he'd be there for them. If he got past a team like New Orleans or even Pittsburgh at 17, once he got past those 2 teams, because I thought he needed to go in the top 15. I thought that there was a very, very hot market for him in picks 10 through about 17 with Tennessee and Miami in San Diego, in New Orleans, in Pittsburgh. Those were all teams in the corner market. Now, was corner a high enough priority for them to select a guy like Xavier Rhodes with their first-round selections? See, the Vikings have multiple first-round selections, so they can take a corner if they see fit. Those other teams only had one selection in the first round, so you got to ask yourself, is a cornerback like Xavier Rhodes something that I have to select right now? And for those teams, the answer was no. We have other pressing needs that we need to address. He's not the best player available at that position in our eyes, and so we need to go in a different direction. For the Vikings, it was simple. We got 2 first-rounders. Xavier Rhodes is sitting there. We could use cornerback help to shore up our secondary. Why not? Simple. So they take Xavier Rhodes, the big, physically imposing 6'2 cornerback out of Florida State. Love his game. I think he's more suited for a defense like the one employed by the Minnesota Vikings. Leslie Frazier, a guy that likes to play a lot of cover too. And so he's going to get his hands on the receivers at the line of scrimmage, try to redirect them off of their route, mess up the timing of the quarterback and the receiver in the passing game, then look to try to get his hands on the football. And so I like Rhodes from that standpoint, that he's physical. Could he be better after he has to turn his hips and run? Sure. But he's long. He's never that far out of the play. When you're a long 6'2 corner, you're always one step away from getting your hands on the football. And so with him being 6'2", him being extremely long, he's not that far out of the play, even when he's beat. If the quarterback doesn't make an excellent throw, if it's underthrown or it's on the money, but he's a step behind, he's so long that, one step and a jump, extend those long Inspector Gadget arms, he's knocking the football away. So you got to love all the skill sets and attributes that Xavier Rhodes brings to the table. And for the Vikings at 25, it was a no-brainer. You take Xavier Rhodes after getting the gift of Sharif Floyd 2 picks earlier. You take Xavier Rhodes off the board, cornerback out of Florida State, and you hit another home run. So it's back-to-back Jacks. And once again, you can put it on the board, Vikings. It's another home run in the first round for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's back-to-back Jacks. Wait! We're not done yet in the first round. The Vikings said, hey, we double dipped and it was so good. I got a triple dip to come back in the first round for a guy that, frankly, we did not think would still be here at 29. Too good to pass up. How about we call up the New England Patriots, get them to give us their 29th overall selection. We'll give up our second and third round selections to come back in the first round at pick 29 to get the receiver out of Tennessee, Cordell Patterson. Whoa. Talk about excellent value. The Vikings have gotten it in the first round. If they were to pack up the rest of their draft and go home, I'd say you did pretty well for yourself in the first round by itself. I mean, what an excellent start to the draft, getting Sharif Floyd, Xavier Rhodes, and now Cordell Patterson all in the first round within 6 picks of each other. I mean, mind-boggling that you get this kind of value at the back half of the first round, but that's exactly what the Minnesota Vikings did. Now, Cordell Patterson, for me, very, very intriguing prospect, because after Tavon Austin, this is the next explosive receiver in this draft. There's not another receiver with the physical gifts that Cordell Patterson possesses in his draft. At 6'2", 215 pounds, we're talking about an explosive 4'4", 40 athlete that, with the ball in his hands, makes things happen. After Tavon Austin, he's the best receiver with the ball in his hands in this draft. And so he gives you added value in the returns game if you see fit to put him back there. This guy's dynamic when you put the football in his hands. Now, this is the question that I have for Cordell Patterson, and everyone probably has this same question. 1 year of production at Tennessee. Came from a JUCO, transferred over to Tennessee, gave us 1 monster year of production. So, does this translate to the National Football League? Because he's still kind of raw, still a lot of things he has to learn at the next level, but you can't teach height, you can't teach speed, you can't teach explosiveness. Either you have it or you don't. And he has all 3. He's a height, weight, speed specimen, and so you can't teach that. So the talent is there. He can catch the football, has some lapses in concentration sometimes, but those are few and far between. So I really don't worry about him there. I worry about the production. Can I trust this guy to be a consistent force in the National Football League? If you draft a receiver in the first round, you're looking for this guy to be a #1 receiver for you somewhere down the line. You got Greg Jennings now. That's great. He doesn't have to shoulder the burden of being the #1 guy right away. But guess what? Greg Jennings is no longer a spring chicken, and so soon he's going to have to take over the crown of being the #1 guy in Minnesota. Can he do that consistently? I have questions, but I can't deny the talent that's there. And this is the thing for me. Vikings fans, listen to me clearly. This is the thing for me. This guy is going to be DT. Either way. For you, he's going to be DT. Which one is the question? And what I mean by DT is he's going to be one of two players. He's either going to be Devin Thomas or Demaryius Thomas. Now, for your sake, you're hoping he's the latter. That being Demaryius Thomas. Because we've seen this type of player before. Devin Thomas, 1 year of production out of Michigan State. Redskins draft him in the second round. He's a bust. He flames out of the league. He's no longer in the National Football League. So we've seen that before. You're hoping he's Demaryius Thomas with 1 year of huge production at Georgia Tech, comes in and lights it up. Which one are you getting? You're hoping it's the latter. You're hoping it's Demaryius Thomas and not Devin. Either way, you've got yourself an explosive athlete in the form of Cordell Patterson, and you just hit another home run. The first ever on this program. Back-to-back-to-back jacks for the Minnesota Vikings. So, once again, you can put it on the board, Vikings. Remember, chicks dig the long ball. And in the first round, the chicks are digging the Minnesota Vikings draft right away. So, you go from that. You don't have a second or a third round pick, but who cares? You just got 3 home runs in the first round. Now that, my friends, is absolute value production and drafting prowess, if I may say so myself, in the first round by the Minnesota Vikings. Now your GM, Rick Spielman, said he's a guy that loves to build through the draft. So I wanted to see what he was going to do in this draft. And right away, he impressed me right off the bat. And then you trade away your second and your third rounders, which I don't mind after the value you get in the first round. But then I wanted to see what he was going to do afterwards. I needed to see what he was going to do for an encore. Because after day 1, he packed his things up and they went home. They didn't have a pick in day 2. So I'll just go golfing and I'll come back for day 3. I wanted to see what he was going to do in day 3. And before we go on to the rest of the draft for the Vikings, let's go to the needs board and look. And right away, I mean, if you're the Vikings, wow, in the first round, you get receiver in Cordell Patterson, corner in Xavier Rhodes, and defensive line in Sharif Floyd out of the way in the first round. I mean, you can't do it any better than that. So right there, you got to love what the Vikings were able to accomplish early on in the draft. So we go to the 4th round when the Vikings enter back into the draft at 120. Linebacker out of Penn State, Gerald Hodges. So you get a solid linebacker again. You're looking for someone to come in and play the linebacker position for you. You lose Jasper Brinkley. You need to replace that kind of guy in your lineup. So you get Gerald Hodges. I don't know if he's an inside linebacker or not. Not sure. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. The thing I do like about Gerald Hodges is that he used to be a safety. So right there, if you're playing cover 2 defense, which the Vikings do like to employ, you're getting a guy that doesn't have a problem in space, dropping back and making plays on the football. Does he always catch the football when he's supposed to? No. But the skill set is there. He's an ex-safety, so he can make plays on the football, and I think he's very comfortable in space. Doesn't have a problem filling in gaps and making tackles on ball carriers. I think he's a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. Is he a supreme athlete? Absolutely not. But I think he does all the little things well, including coverage, tackling. He's very sound in his technique. He's a hard hat and lunch pail guy. He'll give you Ullman-like work at the linebacker position. I think this is an excellent pick if you're looking to get a guy. To me, he exemplifies Minnesota Viking linebacker. He doesn't do anything great. He's not going to jump off the page or the screen. When's the last time the Minnesota Vikings had a linebacker that just absolutely was a man beast in the league? Where you said, man, this guy has been to the Pro Bowl 5 or 6 times. He's a standout. He's one of the best players on defense for the Minnesota Vikings. When's the last time the Vikings had one of those guys at the linebacker position? It's been a while. So when you see a guy like Gerald Hodges, he fits what the Vikings are. Very low-key, low-profile guy, does his job, goes about it the right way, much like a Chad Greenway, much like a Ben Lieber, much like all of these Viking linebackers that have been really good players for the Vikings over the years, E.J. Henderson, Aaron Henderson. He's much in the form of that. He's a guy that's going to play the linebacker position. You're going to get the most out of him. He's going to be very quiet. You're not going to hear a lot out of him. He's just going to do his job. Gerald Hodges, welcome to the Minnesota Vikings. You fit right on in, my friend. So linebacker out of Penn State for me, Gerald Hodges is a triple because he is what the Minnesota Vikings are at the linebacker position. And he's a really good player. I think he's very underrated. And so the Vikings go to linebacker U, get a linebacker in Gerald Hodges. I think he's a triple in the 4th round. You go to the 5th round, pick 155, punter out of UCLA, Jeff Locke. This is simple. He's a punter, so the impact is probably going to be minimal. However, he's already won the job. Chris Kluwe is out as punter in Minnesota. They've already released him, so it's Jeff Locke's job. And I think where he won this job was, simply put, this guy can kick the ball a ton. He's going to give you touchbacks, and in a dome like the Vikings play in at Mall of America Field, you need a guy that's going to give you consistent touchbacks in there. You don't want guys returning with that new rule, pushing the football up to the 35-yard line on kickoffs. You want your kicker to consistently be able to kick it out of the back of the end zone and give you touchbacks. Jeff Locke can do that. Now, he has to be a good punter. He was that at UCLA, so boom, there you have it. It's a double for me in the 5th round, Jeff Locke, punter out of UCLA. So we go to the needs board. You just got Gerald Hodges in the 4th round. In my mind, a triple, a really good addition to your football team. And right there, you've knocked down all of your needs in this draft. So you move on to the 6th round, pick 196, offensive guard out of UCLA. So we go back to the UCLA store, do the Minnesota Vikings, and we go back to the Jeff store. So UCLA and both Jeff. This time, Jeff Baca, guard out of UCLA. This pick is via the Denver Broncos. So we see Rick Spielman shaking and moving, getting picks from other football teams to help fill out his draft. So you look at Jeff Baca, and to me, this is a very good fit in the Vikings' offensive scheme. He's a mauler. He's a physical, nasty offensive lineman who looks to do damage at the guard position. I like him a lot. Now, he's only 6'3", so he's not a huge guy, but at the guard position, you don't have to be overly tall. You don't have to be overly huge. You just need to do your job, and Jeff Baca does his job consistently well. Now, his biggest issue is he's not a huge athlete. So he's strong as hell. And in addition to being extremely strong, he's physical and he's nasty. You know I love my offensive lineman with a disposition that's extremely nasty and aggressive. He's all of that. Now, he can be over-aggressive at times. And when he misses, that athleticism that he lacks that I talked about, it comes into play. Because when you miss and you overextend, you don't have the athletic ability to rebound and get back into position and salvage the play. When you miss and you're not athletic, guess what? You've been beaten, and now somebody's in trouble. Whether it's the ball carrier or the quarterback, that remains to be seen. But either way, you're beaten and you can't recover. And that's his problem. When he overextends himself and is over-aggressive and he misses, he's in trouble. See, when you're athletic and you miss, you can rebound and salvage the play. He can't do that. But when he's on, he locks in on a target and gets his man, oh, it's trouble. And I love it. And so I think in time, here's a guy that could possibly start for you down the road at the guard position in Minnesota. Like the pick. I think it's a very solid selection by the Minnesota Vikings. It's a double for me. In the 6th round, Jeff Baca, guard out of UCLA. So now we go to the 7th round. Vikings have 3 7th round selections. Again, your GM, Rick Spielman, going to work and adding selections to fill out this draft. You get this one from the Arizona Cardinals, linebacker out of Penn State, Michael Matui. And look, at 213, this is a solid pick, but I have questions about Michael Matui because here's a guy that has it in his bloodlines. He's a linebacker. He was born a linebacker. And just like those before him in his family, he went to Penn State. So he goes to linebacker U. Seems like the Vikings like shopping at linebacker U. They go for their 2nd linebacker out of Penn State, this time in the form of Michael Matui. The problem here is he's not athletic, very instinctive, very smart. And you give me an athletically gifted, instinctive, smart linebacker, you got something to work with. You take the athleticism away and you just give me an instinctive and smart linebacker, I still have something to work with. This is the problem, though. He's had 3 ACL injuries in his career, 2 of them catastrophic tears. So we're looking at a guy that has a medical history and a very bad one. And that scares me because after you tear it once, you're likely to tear it again. After you tear it twice, you're likely to tear it again. Once you tear it more than 2 times, I'm afraid that your career is probably over. So for me, this guy could play at the next level. He's limited in what he can do. I think he's a middle linebacker at best. Athletically, I don't think you can put him on the edges at will or strong side linebacker, but I think that the injuries scare me. And I can't get past the injuries because I think this is a guy that his smarts, his instinct, and his innate ability to be a linebacker, just because of where his lineage is and his family and him just being a linebacker. He was born to be a linebacker. It'd be a lot better. I feel a lot more comfortable about this pick and about the player if the medical wasn't there. But at the end of the day, you can't ignore the medical, and I think this is a single linebacker out of Penn State, Michael Matui, in the 7th round at pick 213. Looking at the 7th round at the very next pick, 214, offensive guard out of North Carolina, this pick from Buffalo. So again, Rick Spielman filling out your draft with picks via other football teams. I like it. I like it a lot. Travis Bond. This is a guard out of North Carolina. Huge man, mammoth of a man. At one point, this guy was 6'6", 370 pounds. But he was able to shave off 40 of those pounds, get down to 330, a solid playing weight. And he's a guy that's huge. At the guard position, this is mammoth. This is normally the size of a tackle. 6'6", 330, that's a tackle in the National Football League. You get a guy this big at the guard position, and you wonder, can he move? He's a guy that can move, but he has to build up to that speed, of course. 330, 6'6", big frame, that's a lot of man to move. So, sure, he can get to the 2nd level. But, of course, when you get this kind of big train moving down the tracks, hard to stop it, hard to get it to redirect in different directions. So, he's not a guy that's going to be great at moving bodies down the field. Because if he has to go seek out a defender to block, and they give him a subtle move, he can't stop 330 pounds of 6'6" frame from moving and getting and redirecting it. Once he's going in one direction, he's going in one direction. And so he's one of those type of guys that you get and you're 15 yards down the field and you got to hold their back because they're in the way, but they're not moving fast enough to allow you to accelerate. So at some point, you got to push him out of the way and accelerate. He's not the type of guy that you can just run behind because he's down the field and he's moving and he can redirect and get in someone's way and make a block down the field. So Travis Bond is a guy that I think if the offensive line coach is willing to work with him and if he fits what you're trying to do schematically, he can be a great fit for someone. I don't know if he fits what the Vikings want to do. I do know this from a standpoint of Adrian Peterson and the power run game. Yeah, he's a guy that can engulf a defensive tackle. But if you're trying to get out in the screen game and you want to do a lot of short passing, which the Vikings, I think, do a lot of with Christian Ponder back there, a lot of short passes, a lot of bubble screens, and a lot of things that are quick where you're trying to get the football into the hands of your playmakers. He's not the guy you want on your offensive line if you're going to do that. So I think this is a pick that over time might be something that pans out for you, but I think right now Travis Bond needs work. And so if you are a Minnesota Vikings fan, I think this is a guy that's probably going to be a long shot to make your roster. Maybe you draft and stash him. You draft him, you stash him, you work with him intimately, and maybe down the road he can help you. Or he's a 7th round selection that just frankly doesn't make your roster. But I think it's going to be a long shot for Travis Bond. Offensive guard out of North Carolina. I think he is a single in the 7th round. Finally, we get to the last and final pick in this draft for the Vikings. Their 9th of this draft. The last of their 7th round selections. They had 3 of them. 229th overall selection, defensive tackle out of Florida State, Everett Dawkins. And to me, Dawkins is an interesting prospect. At 6'2", 295, 300 pounds, somewhere in that general vicinity, Dawkins is quicker than fast. He's quicker than strong. So his greatest attribute is his quickness, his ability to knife into a backfield and create havoc and disrupt a play before it even gets started. That's where he makes his living. Problem is he's inconsistent, runs with a high pad level, and so at the next level, I don't think he's going to be able to get away with a lot of that quickness that he exhibited at college. Here's another issue with Dawkins. He's a guy that he's not very strong. So if he can't use his quickness, he's going to be in trouble. And another thing wrong with Everett Dawkins. Look, when you're in the 7th round and you're selected in the 7th round, there's some things wrong. And another thing wrong with Everett Dawkins, that speed that I talked about, or the quickness, rather, that I talked about earlier, it's a strength of his. It's his biggest strength. It's also one of his biggest weaknesses as well. It's a catch-22 because for his quickness and as quick as he can be off the snap, he can be out of control at times too. So he'll knife into the backfield only for the running back to give him a subtle move and he'll miss. Or he'll knife into the backfield, but he's so out of control and his pad level and his feet aren't set and he isn't balanced. He'll knife in, but he'll fall on the ground. And so all of a sudden now you went from disrupting a play to opening up a gaping hole on that defensive line in the center of your defense. So sometimes he's a huge help. Other times he's a huge detriment. He underachieved at Florida State. He's a 7th round pick. Look, the quickness is something you can't deny. And if someone can get to him, get the pad level and the balance better, have him be more of a consistent defender, hey, you got yourself a hidden gem down in the 7th round at defensive tackle Everett Dawkins out of Florida State. But it's a lot of work you have to do, and I don't know if you can change some of his bad habits. It's a single for me in the 7th round, 229th overall selection, defensive tackle out of Florida State, Everett Dawkins. You look at what the Vikings were able to do. They got another linebacker in Michael Matui. They got another defensive lineman in Everett Dawkins. And so that's it for their draft. The top half of this draft was a home run, easily. But the back half of the draft for me didn't do much to move me, but you did get more depth. I like the Baca pick. I think Jeff Locke is going to come in and upgrade your kickoff and maybe even your punting. We'll see. I thought that Chris Cluey was a solid punter for you, so we'll see how he does there. I love the Gerald Hodges pick. I think that you have some interesting prospects here in Matui, who's oft injured and may not be able to give you what you think you're getting out of him. And Travis Bond, who is a huge mammoth of a man, but has a lot of work to do. I think that from your 6th round up, excellent draft. I think your bottom half, those 3 7th rounders, is what brought the value of this draft as a whole down. If I had to go from 6th round up, this is a triple easy, without question. But when you factor in the 7th round and all of these singles down at the bottom, it brings the total value of this draft down to a double. But look, make no mistake about it. This is a wonderful draft by the Minnesota Vikings. I would love to give them a triple, but the numbers don't lie. But what you did in the 1st round, phenomenal. Best 1st round of any team in this draft. I don't care who you stack them up against. Then to not have a 2nd or a 3rd round, that hurt. But all in the name of getting Cordell Patterson in the first round, I don't have a problem with that. Gerald Hodges, I think, is going to be a really good Minnesota Viking linebacker. He fits exactly what the Minnesota Vikings are as a team defensively to a T. And then Jeff Locke coming in there giving you some value. I think Jeff Baca might be the sleeper of this draft for you because I think he's a very, very aggressive offensive lineman, the kind you like to plug in to a offensive line like you have right now. He's athletic enough to get to the second level and do some things for you. And I like his aggressive nature. I think he's the guy that down the road could really help you in this draft. So we'll see how that turns out. But for me, Sharif Floyd, home run. Xavier Rowe, home run. Cordell Patterson, home run. Gerald Hodges, triple. Jeff Locke and Jeff Baca, both doubles. And then you go down the list, Matui, Bond, Dawkins, all singles in the 7th round. It's a double for the Vikings. I think it was an excellent draft overall, however. You look at the top half, and I think that's where the most damage was done in this draft. Kind of fizzled out toward the end, but that's natural when you start getting into the 7th round. You had 3 of them, no 2nd and 3rd round picks. You still did really well for yourself, considering not having a 2nd or 3rd rounder. And so I think the Vikings did well. I think they had an excellent draft. And so I was really pleased with what the Vikings were able to do in addressing a lot of needs for their football team. Now it's up to Christian Ponder to take what the Vikings have given him and take that next step to help this Vikings team as a whole take that next step. And that's going to do it for the Minnesota Vikings in the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up.
Draft Zone.